Hello again, hockey fans, and welcome to our third and final part of our look at the illustrious and controversial career of the great Chris Pronger. If you haven't checked out the other two videos, I suggest you do so now, as we get into a very interesting part of his career. So far, he went from being a second overall pick of the Hartford Whalers and not fitting into their plans, and a little out of control. Then he goes to the St. Louis Blues and evolved from being someone with potential to becoming one of the best players in the entire league and an icon in that franchise's history. But they could no longer afford his contract as the team was restructuring, and they traded him to Edmonton prior to the 05-06 season. The team was trying their hardest to build a competitor as general manager Kevin Lowe and coach Craig McTavish, both part of the infamous Oilers dynasty in the 1980s into the early 1990s, were looking for veteran stars to complement what was already a healthy mix of veterans and youngsters with a defensive mindset, but with the rules of the game changing, signifying the end of the dead puck era. Many were wondering how the Oilers would fare. The last time they made the playoffs, well, it was in 2003, but they barely missed them, finishing 9th in 04. They hadn't won a Stanley Cup since 1990, which was also their last appearance. They had a group of hard-working players leading them. One of the hardest-working talents in the league, Ryan Smith. They had a rising star and a highly talented Czech forward, Elias Hemsky. And they had size up front, lots of size as a matter of fact. Good old Western Canadian boys, Jarrett Stoll and Sean Horkoff. Another rising star and big man, Rafi Torres. And size, again, is what they built this team on. You also had Radek Dvorak, Ethan Moreau, and they also had hard-working depth with veteran Michael Pekka. But who's joining Pronger on defense? Well, he adds more size to an already sizable blue line, Steve Staios, but also yet the smaller yet highly talented Marc-Andre Bergeron, and he gives the blue line more depth to boot. The team captain and veteran Jason Smith also was a towering presence, and he had 13-year veteran and Russian import Igor Ulanov. In net, they were giving the shot to the Finnish import Jussi Markkanen, coming off a great year in Europe, and backups Mike Morrison and Ty Conklin. The Oilers were simply seen as middle of the road. Maybe they will, maybe they won't make the playoffs team. Their odds of winning the Cup were tied for 16th overall at 2,500. Well, so now Pronger is the question. He has battled knee issues and other injuries in the past, but had a great season in 03-04 and is well rested, but the game is changing, and that always tests any given player no matter how great they are. Oilers fans were excited, so excited that Pronger's new Oilers jersey sold out like hotcakes. But now we'll see if he can help this team out. On October 5, 2005, Pronger made his debut on home ice as an Edmonton Oiler, receiving a rousing ovation from the home fans, as he played very well, refamiliarizing himself with Joe Sakic and helping the Oilers get the win, the first of 3 in a row to start the season. And in that third straight run, Pronger had 2 assists and made Teemu Selanne work harder than he's used to. But then the team went into a 7-game losing streak, and Pronger was struggling greatly, not just statistically with no points and a -1, but he seemed to have trouble asserting his physical presence. However, that changed real quick after they broke that slump with a 5-game win streak, and Pronger was on a roll. 5 assists and a +2, and dishing out that trademark punishment on the likes of Rick Nash and Pavel Datsyuk, while blocking any shot that came near him any way he could from Sergei Zubov or former Blues teammate Keith Tkachuk. And yes, the 5th game in that winning streak, Pronger returned to St. Louis and received a tremendous reception amongst the fans, knowing that he really didn't want to leave the team, as he spent 9 years there. He played great in a road game against Columbus and was a +3. Also, Pronger was playing that strict game that he played in his MVP year in 2000. He wasn't taking many penalties. He was still pesky as ever, but he knew with the rule changes in a more open game and NHL officials cracking down on certain fines, well, that giving up scoring plays could be more costly than ever, as now scoring forwards now have a more open game. The Oilers continued to go back and forth in the first half of the season, but in December went on another 5-game win streak where Pronger had 5 points and was a +1. Hey, and Saku Koivu, thanks for coming. Jerome McGinley, I ain't scared of you. Pavel Demitra, we're not teammates anymore. Bring it on. Then Pronger had more big games. On New Year's Eve, a 4-assist game and a losing cause to Calgary. The Oilers ever started to struggle again in January, but in a game on the 25th against Anaheim, Pronger had 2 goals and assists for a big 3-point night. One of the changes the NHL made was foregoing the All-Star game on Olympic years, so there would be no midseason classic and the Olympic break would hit February, and people were eager to see again if Canada could repeat as gold medalist. Teammate Ryan Smith joined him, as he was also on the 0-2 winning team. Pronger and Smith were 2 out of 8 players returning from that very team. Pronger, along with Joe Sakic, Adam Foote, and Rob Blake, have now played in all 3 NHL-oriented Olympic Games for Team Canada. But of course, these Olympics were a disaster for Team Canada, finishing a horrendous 7th place, while Oiler players Hemsky as well as Jaroslav Spacek, both playing for the Czech Republic, nabbed a bronze medal. Pronger shook off the Olympic disappointment, and in the second game after the break, had 2 goals against the Predators, and then followed that out with 2 assists in a shootout loss to the Dallas Stars. Pronger was not put off by this new era, he was owning it. He continued to roll. That including rolling over the likes of Marian Gabrick, the Sedin twins, and good old Jumbo Joe. Another 2-assist game against the Wild, a +3 against Phoenix. As the season was winding down, and the Oilers, after April 7th, found themselves in 7th place, but Vancouver could be a late threat to swoop into the playoffs, as also the Oilers were only a point up on 8th place Colorado. But the Oilers stayed strong and hung on. While they did slip to 8th, the Canucks couldn't catch them, and Pronger finished his debut season at Edmonton with a 2-assist performance over the Ducks, which cemented their playoff status. The Oilers finished 41, 28, and 13 for 95 points. Just good enough for 8th place, just showing how competitive the conference as a whole was becoming. Pronger hasn't missed the playoffs since he left Hartford, and the Oilers, however, aren't being given a snowball's chance in hell against, oh boy, a team Pronger is too familiar with, the top-seeded Detroit Red Wings, a team that finished with a monster 124 points, led by the ageless Brendan Shanahan. They had two young superstars, Pavel Datsyuk and Henrik Zetterberg, also other great talents up front, Robert Lang, Thomas Holmstrom, and literally on his last legs, Captain Steve Yzerman. Also, fan favorites Chris Draper and Kirk Mulvey were still doing their thing, and on defense, they are led by a man who rivals Pronger as the best in the game at defense, Nicholas Lidstrom, and of course 20-plus year veteran Chris Chelios, another all-star vet, Matthew Schneider, and Jason Woolley. And in net, the duo of many legacy and the returning Chris Osgood, another now former teammate of Pronger's. The Oilers, speaking of goalies, went with 37-year-old Dwayne Rolson, who they acquired, late in the season. And mostly known for his time in the minor leagues, he finally proved himself during his tenure in Minnesota. But the Oilers' season looked to be finished before the series started. Game 1 in Motown. And the Oilers are keeping up with the Red Wings every step of the way. It's tied 1-1 after the first period. Midway through the second period on the power play, Pronger scores, and the Oilers actually lead 2-1 after 2. Rolson is sensational in that. He faces a barrage of shots and turns them back, while the Wings' trademark defensive play is still a force to be reckoned with. Eventually, Rolson can only do so much as Maltby ties it with 6:17 to play, and we're off to overtime. The Oilers aren't getting many chances. Rolson is keeping them in the game, and they can't capitalize. We go to double OT, and just over 2:30 in, Maltby scores. The Oilers lose. Game 2 and our anti-hero is a one-man wrecking crew as Rolson continues to shine. It don't matter if it's a wounded Yzerman or young Zetterberg or fellow blue liner Lidstrom, Pronger is there. To boot, he has a goal and an assist and is on ice for all 4 goals with a huge +4 performance. The Oilers stun the Wings on their home ice with a 4-2 win. The series is tied going into Edmonton. Rexall places rocking for Game 3, and the Oilers fans believe. The Oilers actually lead 2-1 after 1 period. And then on the power play, Pronger sets up Torres. It's 3-1 Oilers after 2 periods. However, midway in the third, the Edmonton faithful are silenced as the Wings get 2 goals 18 seconds apart. We're off to another overtime. It's the same old story. Rolson is being bombarded, and the Oilers can't get many chances. And once again, we're off to double OT, and 8:44 in, Jared Stahl scores. The Oilers win. They take a 2-1 series lead. What is happening here? Topsy-turvy. Game 4 was tied 2-2 after 2, but the Wings took control in the win in 4-2. All but 1 goal in the game was scored on the power play from either team. Guess it's back to reality with the series tied heading back to Detroit for Game 5. After a scoreless first period, Pronger sets up Pisani, and the Oilers draw first blood. Just over 3 minutes later on the power play, Pronger takes command of the extra man shift, and he and Stoll set up Smith 2-0. 4 minutes later, Pronger to Jason Smith to Horkov, a goal, 3-0. Pronger has set up all 3 goals. The Wings make a comeback bid, but Rolson stays strong, and the Oilers win 3-2. They have the Wings against the wall? Wow! This never happened in St. Louis, well, except in '96, and we know what happened there. Game 6 in Edmonton, Rexall is shaking. The Oilers are on the verge of one of the biggest playoff upsets of all time, while Pronger can finally say he's beaten the Red Wings. But the Oilers trail 2-0 after 2, and the game is tied 2-2, however, after 2 goals from Pisani, who's having a great series. The Wings retake the lead, however, in a wild third period. But Hemsky scores with 3:53 to play to tie it, and with 1:06, he scores again. 1:06 to play, and the roof blows out the arena. The Edmonton Oilers hang on to win! What a glorious win, what a monster upset, which the Oilers have been no stranger of pulling off playoff upsets since 1997, but this was the biggest of them all. And how great must this feel for Pronger after all that heartbreak, those 3 straight years in the mid to late 90s losing to the Red Wings, and of course that devastating knee injury he suffered in 2002. It had to be a huge personal win for him, and he was incredible, perhaps playing the best playoff series of his career to date, and arguably has never been more disciplined. 7 points and a +4. Now, winning the Oilers is a team Pronger is also very familiar with, the San Jose Sharks. The Sharks made it to the conference finals in 2004 for the very first time and are hungry to get to the Cup after a 99-point season. It's very much possible. They disposed of the Nashville Predators in 5 games. And hey, this team's pretty stacked itself. Up front, the NHL's MVP and scoring leader, Joe Thornton. Also the NHL's leading goal scorer, Jonathan Chichu. And oh yeah, some guy named Patrick Marleau. Also you have Nils Ekman, Alan McCauley adding depth, and the very underrated defense of Kyle McLaren, Christian Ehrhoff, and Tom Preissing. In net, you had Vesa Toskala, who took over for the struggling Evgeny Nabokov. Either way, this is anyone's series on paper. Game 1 in San Jose, Pronger continues to shine, as does Rolison, but the Sharks escape with a tight 2-1 victory. It's the exact same thing in Game 2, as the Sharks are playing a very fine, tooth-comb strategic hockey and win 2-1 again, taking both games at home. But the Edmonton faithful in Game 3, they still believe, and Pronger and the Oilers' defense finally give Rolison some more breathing room. The Sharks, however, still lead 2-1 after 1, but with 6:47 left, Pronger took command and helped Stahl set up Torres to tie the game, and we're off to overtime. The Oilers bombard Toskala, but he is standing tall. The second OT is the same, as the Sharks can't get many opportunities, as Pronger and company are all over the Sharks' top forwards. And in the third overtime, it finally pays off. Just over 2 minutes in, Horkov scores. The Oilers are now in this thing. Game 4, the Sharks were leading 2-0 in the first, but Pronger helped his captain set up Horkov, and the Oilers trailed 2-1 after 1. They went down 3-1, but then fought to tie it 3-3 after 2. The Oilers took control again, as Pronger was blocking shots, making hits, and Rolison wasn't being overworked these past couple of games. And the Oilers just attacked Toskala and later Nabokov and walked away with a 6-3 win. The series is tied, heading back to San Jose. In Game 5, the Oilers' power play, as it did against the Wings, looks sharp again, as Pronger sets up Ryan Smith for a go-ahead goal. Oilers lead 2-1 after 2. And then they lead 3-1 early in the third, and the Sharks fight to tie it. However, the Oilers go on a tear. 1 goal, 2 goal, and for the third goal, Pronger sets up Smith. Another 6-3 win. The Oilers are 1 game away from continuing this miracle run. And in Game 6, they do it. Pronger and the Oilers' defense hold firm. Rolison stops all 24 shots he faces, and they win 2-0. For the first time since 1992, the Oilers are going to the conference finals, and for Pronger, the second trip of his career, and the first since 2001. And Pronger is making a strong case for himself for that coveted Conn Smythe Trophy as playoff MVP, like he did in 2001, although Rolison was probably the front runner. But either way, 5 assists, a +4. He's played some of the best hockey of his entire career in his first year in Edmonton. The Oilers were now tasked with taking on a team who was evenly matched with them, the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim. The last year they would go under that name, making their second conference final appearance in 3 seasons. They made it all the way to the Stanley Cup in 2003. They were boosted by the return of Teemu Selanne, who is still playing great hockey. Andy McDonald, Joffrey Lupul, and Chris Kunitz also made their presence felt. They also had great role players, Rob Niedermeyer, and a pest named Corey Perry, and an up-and-comer by the name of Ryan Getzlaf. The defense, woo boy! If we thought Detroit matched up well to Pronger, Scott Niedermeyer, after 12 years in New Jersey, is now a Duck. Also, you had Francois Beauchemin and Ruslan Saleh. They add a lot to the blue line as well, and in net you had the duo of Jay Jaguar and Ilya Brizgalov. The Ducks finished with 98 points, eliminated a great Calgary Flames team, and swept out the Colorado Avalanche to get here. Game 1 in Anaheim, and the Oilers are carrying their momentum. Tied 1-1 after the first period, Pronger again commands an insanely hot power play, and he and Ryan Smith set up Hemsky and take a lead en route to a 3-1 win. Game 2, Pronger opens the scoring on the power play, no less, and this plays another huge game. It's a 3-1 win. The Oilers take both games in Anaheim. Game 3, Rexall Blaze is rocking, and the fans can taste it. And what would take place was one of the wildest third periods ever seen. After 2 periods, the Oilers led 1-0, and that goal came in the first, but then in the third, Pekka, Steos, Pronger, the latter two coming on the power play, all 2:21 apart. It's 4-0, but O'Donnell, Selanne, and Kunitz. 4 minutes apart, it's now 4-3. Then 3 minutes after that, Pisani wakes up Rexall again. It's 5-3. With 1:45 remaining, Todd Marchand scores, and the fans are holding their breath, but the Oilers hang on, and they're on the verge of a sweep. Game 4, Rexall's roof is blowing out the place before the game even starts. The Oilers could go to the Cup and obtain a sweep while doing it. And for our anti-hero, he would be making his first Stanley Cup appearance. But the Ducks stun the Oilers with a 3-0 lead after the first period. The Oilers do make a game of it in the second, but can never truly reach them. They shockingly lose 6-3. But Game 5 back at Anaheim, nobody is panicking. The Oilers remain dead focused, and Pronger is getting extra physical, trying to create anything he can. The Oilers led 2-1 after 2 periods. In the third, Rolison was turning back everything. The clock ticked down. 3, 2, 1, 0. The Edmonton Oilers are going to the Stanley Cup. Chris Pronger, after 12 NHL seasons, has reached the Promised Land. Pronger's command of the power play was the huge difference maker in the series, and he is now rewarded with his first chance at a Stanley Cup ring. But just who stands in the way of Pronger being a champion? Well, playing their just their second cup final in history, the Carolina Hurricanes. But they weren't always known as the Carolina Hurricanes. Before 1997, they were the Hartford Whalers. Yes, this is the very team that drafted Pronger, and the man at the GM helm is the man who traded him away, Jim Rutherford, who has spent years undoing so much damage done to that franchise, and it now looks like it may pay off. The 2005-06 Carolina Hurricanes were a polarizing story. They were expected to finish near the basement, yet finished with 112 points, a franchise best. It's easy to see why. They were led by young sensation Eric Stahl, coming off a 100-point season. They had other young talents, like Justin Williams. But look who else they had. Eric Cole, Ray Whitney, Matt Cullen, Mark Recchi, Pronger's former teammates in St. Louis, Doug Waite and Corey Stillman, and the team captain was veteran all-star Rod Brindamore. Not just their forwards, their defense, Brett Hedican, Aaron Ward, Frank Caberlet, and Glenn Wesley. In net they had a rookie, however, in Cam Ward, taking over for Martin Gerber. The Hurricanes beat a determined half squad, but rolled over the New Jersey Devils in 5, and just wrapped up a grueling 7-game series with the team that a lot of people thought might win the Cup this year, the Buffalo Sabres. But many truly believed the Oilers' miracle could come to fruition. Here we go. Pronger now gets his shot, his first Stanley Cup game. Game 1 in Carolina. And leading 1-0 after the first period and the second, a Carolina skater illegally covered the puck during a skirmish in front of the net, meaning Edmonton was awarded a penalty shot. And the man to take it was going to be Chris Pronger. In the 113-year history of the Stanley Cup, nobody has scored on a penalty shot. And if NHL wasn't so damn stingy, after giving me a copyright strike 6 times despite using 4 different videos, Pronger, I would show this, Pronger smoothly skated on goal, snapped the shot past Ward, and made NHL history. The first, and as of 2022, the only player in NHL history to score a penalty shot in the Stanley Cup Finals. Was there anything this guy couldn't do? The Oilers went up 3-0, but sadly they collapsed and trailed 4-3, but Pronger and Stahl set up Hemsky in a huge power play goal to tie it. But Brindamore scored the game winner with 32 seconds to play, and the Hurricanes take Game 1. Game 2, it is bad news. Rolston is injured and Markkanen starts. Cam Ward plays up beauty and the Hurricanes defense is on point, and the Hurricanes dominate 5-0. And the Oilers find themselves down 2-0 as the series shifts to Edmonton. But again, if these playoffs prove anything, you can't count the Oilers out despite the obstacles. Pronger plays a very physical game, blocking some key shots, and Markkanen is actually excellent in net. And our anti-hero gives him some breathing room, however, and with 2:15 to play and the score tied at 1, Ryan Smith scores the game winner. The Oilers are at last in this thing. Game 4 is a very defensive game, but this time it's the Hurricanes' time to shine once again. The Oilers cannot garner enough momentum, and Pronger does play well, but the Oilers lose 2-1 and find themselves on the verge of elimination. Game 5 in Carolina, the faithful is roaring, as they are just one win away from their franchise's first ever Stanley Cup, while Pronger helps silence them quick. He sets up the red-hot Fernando Pisani just 16 seconds into the game. The game, however, goes back and forth. It goes 2-1 Hurricanes, then 3-2 Oilers, and with 18 seconds left in the first, Pronger helps set up Pekka, but it's tied 3-3 after 2, and then after 3, but then a mistake from the Hurricanes allows Pisani to score a huge shorthanded goal. The Oilers force a Game 6 back home. Oh, baby. The Oilers are unstoppable in Game 6. 4 goals, 3 on the power play. Pronger, Jason Smith, Stales, and Spotcheck are all out there in that 4-0 win. They are just killing it. We're going to Game 7. Chris Pronger is 1 win away from reaching the very top of the mountain. He's playing very well, and so is the Oilers' defense. But after 2 periods, it's 2-0 Hurricanes. Early in the third, Pisani gives the Oilers life with a goal, and they only trail by 1. The Oilers are pressing, trying with all their might. Pronger is just trying to get on every play he can. But just about a minute to go, Justin Williams ices it. An empty netter. The Oilers lose. Carolina takes the cup. Pronger played excellently in the final. And although the playoffs and with Rolston getting injured, we'll never know if things worked out differently. And also, had the Oilers won, Pronger, along with Pisani, would have been likely top candidates for the Conn Smythe Trophy. Either way, Pronger has nothing to be ashamed of with his performance in his very first Cup final. And Pronger was third in playoff scoring with his 21 points, just 5 behind former teammate Corey Stillman, who along with Doug Waite won their first Stanley Cup. As Pronger was now seeing former teammates reach glory. Pronger's plus 10 was tied for 6th best in the playoffs as well. And back to his regular season numbers. Pronger had 12 goals and 44 assists for 56 points, the second best career total. And wow, Alex Hemsky had a career year and was Pronger's main man. Together they combined for 26 goals one way or another. That's nearly half of Pronger's overall total. On top of that, Jarrett Stahl also assisted on more than half of Pronger's goals like Hemsky, as Pronger and Stahl collaborated for 15 goals overall. He also clicked with Ryan Smith for 13 goals, and while he may not be on this picture, Pronger and Sean Horkoff worked very well, 15 goals one way or another together, and Pronger fit in perfectly for McTavish's defensive strategy. Pronger's 56 points was good enough for 9th best in the league, and for the fourth time in his career, he reached the top 10 among defensive scorers. Pronger came in 7th for Norris Trophy voting and received 97 votes for the award. Also, he got more Hart Trophy votes this year, well, one to be exact, finishing 26th. Pronger's first year in Edmonton was a biggie. He fits in well with the team's strategy and helped build a winning combination with the team's role players and hard-working forwards, and for the first time in his career, made it all the way to the finals, and made it to Game 7, however, in a losing cause. He did, however, have 21 playoff points, good enough for 3rd. Became the first player in NHL history, and as of 2022, the only one to score a penalty shot goal in the Cup Finals. Significant votes for the Norris, a vote for the Hart, and represented Team Canada for the 3rd time at the Olympics. And his former team, you ask, the St. Louis Blues? They missed the playoffs for the first time in 27 years. Yeah, it looked like Pronger was in it for a long and productive stay in the city of Edmonton in hopes of building a champion. Yeah, right. In a shocking turn of events, Pronger, who was under contract for 4 more years of a 5-year deal worth more than $31 million, requested a trade? This was a puzzling move considering the success he was having with the team and how well he fit in. He just played in the Stanley Cup! GM Kevin Lowe had stated that Pronger requested the trade for, quote, personal reasons not specified. The Edmonton media, however, had speculated that Pronger's wife Lauren didn't like living in Edmonton. The rumors to this day have never been confirmed or, for that matter, denied. Either way, the media and even the fans had labeled Pronger public enemy number 1 in Edmonton. Videos circulated of fans burning their Pronger jerseys, and this was early in the days of YouTube. There was even an urban myth that they'd taken Pronger's furniture and burnt it. Now, he stated on Jim Rome's radio show a couple years later in January of 2008, when Rome pretty much called out Pronger for betraying the team and the city, he stated, "Yeah, there's things that didn't set well with me. For instance, taking the furniture that I had in my house and burning it, and having a burn Chris Pronger's furniture day. They burned my kid's crib and things like that." These are actually very unsubstantiated claims. There was never a call to the authorities, news coverage, or anything like that. This is Pronger simply either being a troll, trying not to look like the bad guy, or both, and we just know Pronger sometimes just loves to entertain without microphones in front of his face. Well, Pronger got his wish on July 3rd, 2006, and was traded to the rising Anaheim Ducks team, now no longer known as the Mighty Ducks, for Joffrey Lupul, Ladislav Smid, and a 2007 first-round draft pick, a 2008 second-round draft pick, and a conditional first-round pick in 2008 if the Ducks reached the finals in 2007. Crazy deal, to say the least. Well, his time in Edmonton was short, his departure not so sweet. He made a great impact, however, adjusting to this new era of hockey very quick and fitting in perfectly to what the Oilers' strategy was. And he made it to the Stanley Cup Finals for the first time in his career and played outstanding in said playoffs. Well, the Oilers' era ends quick and acrimoniously, and now we look towards his time on the West Coast. Well, despite being public enemy number 1 in Edmonton, he was welcomed with open arms to Anaheim. Like his rival in Edmonton, his jersey sold like hotcakes. The Ducks had yet to win a Stanley Cup, however, in their 13 years of existence, but made it in 2003, and of course just lost to Pronger and the Oilers the year prior in the conference finals. And even though McInnes and Pronger was a lethal combo, now our anti-hero was about to be teamed with All-Star future Hall of Famer Scott Niedermayer. They also had other talented young blue liners such as Francois Beauchemin and Shane O'Brien, and veteran Sean O'Donnell. Up front, you had one of the best of all time, Teemu Selanne, and 2 very promising young forwards, Ryan Getzlaf and that Corey Perry. He also had Andy McDonald, talented left winger Chris Kunitz, and big man Dustin Penner, as well as role players like gritty Travis Moen, veteran Todd Marchand, and great leadership qualities and hard work from Scott's younger brother, Rob Niedermeyer. And in net, you had 2003 playoff hero Jaya Jaguar and Ilya Brizgalov. And the general manager was Brian Burke, the man who drafted Pronger back in 1993 in Hartford. And he had now assembled one of the deepest teams in the league, while coach Randy Carlisle was ready to implement a strategy to bring it all together. His first game as a member of the Ducks takes place on October 6, 2006, hosting the LA Kings in a win. He then had a goal and an assist in a shootout loss to the Islanders on October 9th. The Ducks were looking superb as they won their fourth game in a row on October 25th against Pronger's former team, the Edmonton Oilers, where Pronger had 3 assists and was a +3. Yeah, he was off to a great start, but Pronger truly came unleashed in November. 3 goals, 16 assists, 19 points, 15 games, and a +11 in just 8 penalty minutes. Highlights of the month included a 3-point night against Phoenix and 2 assists against the Flyers on November 15th. And Pronger had introduced himself to sophomore Sidney Crosby, and even though Shanny is no longer Red Wing wing, that didn't stop Pronger from standing in the way of the now Rangers star. And yes, the success continued. More 2-point games. The Coyotes, the Sharks, the Avalanche, the Flames each fell victim to our anti-hero. So did Patrick Elias, Brendan Morrison, and Patrick Marleau. But all eyes were on him on November 28th as he returned to Edmonton for the first time since the big trade. And the moment he hit the ice for the pregame warm-up, he was mercilessly booed as crude and negative signs made by fans targeting him were held up all at once. Every time he touched the puck, he was booed from beginning to end. That didn't stop him from notching an assist and the Ducks winning in overtime. Pronger had 3 goals, 9 assists, and 12 points in December, and the Ducks were one of the top teams in the league. However, on a New Year's Eve game early on against the Minnesota Wild, he would suffer what was later to be revealed as a broken foot. He'd missed 9 games, and the Ducks struggled a bit, going 2-5-2 without him, as they were rattled with injuries at the time, and he had 2 assists, however, in an early February game against the Sharks upon his return, but the Ducks' woes continued and lost 3 in a row, but broke the streak as Prongers had 2 goals in a win over Phoenix. 2-point nights against Colorado and LA as we march our way into the playoffs. The Ducks are looking oh so good. But after a win over Nashville, Pronger's injuries lingered again and he missed 7 more games. But he returned with a vengeance as the Ducks continued to work like a perfectly oiled machine from the strength on top to the hard workers on the 3rd and 4th lines. Pronger also had a huge 3-point night, 2 goals and an assist for 3 points as he and Niedermeyer are just killing it, and a 2-assist night over the Sharks. Also, injuries didn't stop him from blocking shots from the likes of fellow blue liner Duncan Keith or dishing out punishment again to, hey, it's your old pal Pavel Datsyuk. A huge year for Pronger as the Ducks finished 48, 20, and 14 for 110 points, their best season in franchise history, 2nd best in the West. But this road wasn't going to be easy because out of the playoffs, 8 of the teams, the playoff teams that is, a record 7 of them had 100 points. So the Minnesota Wild, while ranked 7th, only had 6 points less than the Ducks this season. They were coached by the Sultan of the Dead Puck era, Jacques Lemaire. He had no trouble getting this team to adjust to this new era, however. Up front they had a lot of depth. Big Brian Rolston, young star Marian Gaborik, and Pronger's former Blues ally, Pavel Demitra. You had Pierre-Marc Bouchard, Miku Koivu, and Mark Parrish. They also had a great deal. Also talented defense of Kim Janssen, Keith Carney, and a sophomore by the name of Brent Burns. And in net, the amazing duo of Manny Fernandez and Nicholas Backstrom, who allowed the fewest goals to the NHL. The Ducks weren't taking the Wild lightly, but they were ready. Game 1 in Anaheim, and the pond is duck crazy as the Ducks defense and Brizgalov are all over the lack of the Wild offense. But Backstrom is doing his thing in net for the Wild. Pronger is in command of the game from the word go, as the Wild forwards are doing everything they can to avoid him like the plague. The end result, with 5:20 left to play, Penner breaks a 1-1 tie. The Ducks take a tight first game. 2-1, however, it's a little different. The Wild's defense steps up, and their forwards bombard Brizgalov, and Pronger is having some trouble. But the Ducks leading 2-1 late in the second, Pronger on a penalty kill does his magic, getting the puck out, allowing Moen to set up Getzlaf, and the Ducks lead 3-1. It proves to be the game winner in a tight 3-2 win. The Ducks take both games at home. The series shifts to the land of 1,000 lakes, and Pronger is just destroying the Wild, dishing out jarring hits, blocking big shots, and giving Brizgalov a lot of space. And on top of that, he assists on both Ducks goals, the second of which was to Rob Niedermeyer midway through the third, making it 2-0. And while the Wild get one back, it's not enough. the Ducks are putting the Wild on the verge of a sweep. And Game 4, after a scoreless first period on the, you guessed it, power play, Pronger scores a biggie in the second. The Ducks strike first, but then fall apart. The Wild tie it late in the second, and Brizgalov lets in 3 goals in 7 minutes in the third. His night and his series, and most of the playoffs pretty much, are done for him. The Ducks lose 4-1, and the Wild stay alive. Game 5 back in Anaheim, Pronger isn't going to play nice. That's just a minute into the game. He scores, and the Ducks cruise on that momentum. Our anti-hero is hitting everything and everyone in sight, whether it's the puck with his stick, or any oncoming forward, or any skater, it doesn't matter. And knows where the puck is always going to be, it seems. And reads plays easier than a pop-up book, and midway through the third, the Ducks up 2-1. He helps Dustin Penner set up Corey Perry. The Ducks take a 3-1 lead en route to taking the game and the series 4-1. Pronger's 6 points in 5 games led the entire series in scoring, and you could see clearly that getting a shot at the championship glory last year was unleashing something in him this year. But he was staying disciplined. Well, at least for now he was. And awaiting them in the second round were the Vancouver Canucks, a little different from the Canucks team that Pronger and the Blues dealt with in 2003. While Marcus Naslund was still one of their biggest stars, the Sedin twins, Daniel and Henrik, were growing into bona fide superstars in their own right. Also, Brendan Morrison, Taylor Pyatt, Matt Cook, and the heart of the Canucks on and off for nearly 20 years, Trevor Linden, was also a big part of this team. On defense, a very dynamic bunch, including tough Kevin Biesca, Sammy Salo, and Matthias Olin. And in net, the one and only Roberto Luongo. The Canucks were another 100-point-plus club and could give the Ducks a lot to handle. Game 1 in Anaheim, Pronger is throwing his weight around, but the Canucks strike first. But just over 2 minutes later, Pronger steers another power play as he and Kunitz set up McDonald to tie the game, and the Ducks go on cruise control as they take a 3-1 lead after 1 and go on to take the game 5-1. Game 2, however, Jaguar and Luongo are putting on a show, while Pronger is a thorn in the side of Vancouver skaters, and the game is tied 1-1 after regulation. In overtime, the goalies are on fire, and neither team can get anything going. But then in the double OT period, Jeff Cowan shocks the Ducks and their fans, and the series is tied at 1 heading to Vancouver. Game 3, it's another tight-knit competitive game. It was tied 1-1 after 1, but midway through the second, as Pronger again takes hold of the power play, he to Kunitz to Boschman, he scores! The Ducks go up 2-1, but the Canucks tie up before the end of the second. But on another power play, nearly 8 minutes into the third, Pronger sets up Corey Perry, and the Ducks have the lead, and they hang on for the big win. Game 4, Pronger's physical assertion does not seem to be facing the Canucks as they lead 2-0 after 2 periods. So in the third period, Pronger would have to do some damage on the score sheet. 4 minutes into the third, Pronger scores, and the Ducks are in this thing. And then as the Ducks continue to press with 5:42, remember, Pronger, Solani, it's the goal, we're going to OT. It only takes just over 2 minutes for Travis Moen to give the Ducks the win and put them on the verge of a series win as we head back to the coast. Game 5, Pronger and Niedermeyer are barely allowing the Canucks near Jaguar the entire game. After a scoreless first period, the Ducks strike in the second, but the Canucks make the most of their rare chance on Jaguar and tied the game in the third. And at the end of regulation and in overtime, the Ducks stick to their strategy, and Jaguar is well protected again in large part thanks to our anti-hero, but it's not until early in the second OT that partner in crime, Scott Niedermeyer, scores a huge goal, and the Ducks, for the third time in 4 seasons, are headed to the conference final, as Pronger is getting a step closer to another chance. Pronger was again outstanding, leading a tremendous power play and using his trademark tactics, and getting under the skin of many Canucks players. Again, he could almost taste it. Oh, but hey, another familiar foe awaits, the Detroit Red Wings. And yes, gone was Stevie Y. Shenny was a Ranger now, but the team had 2 young stars, Zetterberg and Datsuk. Guys like Johan Franzen and Thomas Holmstrom and Michael Samuelsson were also making waves. And the defense was still led by the new captain of the team, Nicholas Lidstrom, and joined by the ageless Chris Chelios, and in net, the Dominator. Pronger was part of a monster upset beating the Wings as a member of the Oilers, but now they were on equal footing. It wasn't going to get any easier. Game 1 in Detroit was a very defensive battle as Pronger was doing everything he could to make sure the Red Wings would garner no momentum. But with the game tied 1-1 late, and with just under 5 minutes to play and on the power play, Holmstrom scores what would be the game winner. The Wings take Game 1. Game 2 is a very highly competitive outing once again. The game was tied 1-1. Pronger assisted on Andy McDonald's goal in the second period, but the Wings tied it. It was 2-2 after 2. Both teams traded goals in the third, and we're off to overtime. And again, Scott Niedermeyer is the hero, and we have a tie series heading to Anaheim. And in Game 3, our anti-hero is the center of controversy. Big surprise. The Ducks and Pronger were playing terribly down 4-0. Thomas Holmstrom had 2 goals, was skating in on the boards, and Rob Niedermeyer just had to dish out a little something that he probably shouldn't have. But as he was stuck to Niedermeyer, in came Pronger with the elbow up, slamming the Red Wings star forward into the glass. He was cut up pretty good, and while Rob was given a penalty, Pronger was not. The Wings won the game 5-0 and led the series 2-1. And to make things worse, the league reviewed the hit and Pronger was assessed a 1-game suspension. Ducks GM Brian Burke insisted it was not a dirty hit and there was no intent to injure and that it only happened because of Niedermeyer's penalty. Pronger didn't initially speak to the media, and Brian Burke had said, "He's sour about it. That's why he's not talking to you guys. The league doesn't like us swearing, and I don't want Chris to talk to anyone today." Later on, Pronger targeted the Canadian sports media for their coverage of the whole deal, harshly vilifying him. While it is clear Pronger was going for Holmstrom's head, anyone could see that, and it came off as, again, Pronger stomping his feet because he didn't get his way. That being said, Rob Niedermeyer should also have been shouldering a lot of the blame. But indeed, the 1-game suspension stands, but the Ducks take Game 4 by a score of 5-3 thanks to an epic 3-point night from Solani, and the series is tied 2-2 heading back to Motown. Pronger returns for Game 5, and Detroit fans hate him with the fire of 1,000 suns, or in a better analogy, hate him like fans in Edmonton. Booed every time he touched the puck, but he didn't let up on any Detroit forward, let alone Holmstrom. The Ducks were down 1-0 and time was ticking down, and the Dominator, Dominic Hasek, and the Wings defense was just too much to handle, but on a power play, just 48 seconds left to play, Pronger to Solani to Niedermeyer, it's a goal! We're off to OT and nearly 12 minutes into the extra frame, Solani wins it for the Ducks, and we're just 1 game away from going to the Stanley Cup, and Pronger ready to go back for a 2nd straight year. Game 6, the fans are excited, and on the penalty kill, O'Donnell gets the puck to Pronger, to Rob, it's a goal! The Ducks lead 1-0 after 1, and 3-0 after 2, and our anti-hero is playing with that channeled, reckless abandon, almost as if he's daring the league to do something about it. The Ducks lead 4-1, but in the 3rd, the Wings got 2 back, but Pronger is playing his heart out. Shigera is holding them in. 3, 2, 1, 0. The Ducks and Chris Pronger are going to the Stanley Cup. Oh yes, mean Chris was back, and it showed. While his playing style never changed truly in his career, even after he left St. Louis, he was taking much more risks than he did the year prior in Edmonton. He was like a powder keg. Hell, the Terminator showed more mercy than Chris Pronger did in these playoffs. And despite the suspension, much like a killer cyborg, he was indeed zeroing in on his target. That is Lord Stanley. And standing in the way of the Ducks reaching their first Cup glory was the Ottawa Senators. Since the turn of the 21st century, have been a prominent contender but could never get there. The team finished with 105 points and arguably had the most skilled, dynamically talented top lines in all of hockey, the great Daniel Alfredsson, a highly skilled two-way forward who can be a pest but rarely got caught, Danny Heatley, a highly dimensional goal-scoring champ, and playmaking center Jason Spezza. You also had a great supporting crew up front, Mike Fisher, Anton Vermette, Chris Kelly, and Dean McCammon. On defense, all-star Wade Redden, big man Chris Phillips, Tom Preissing, and the underrated Christophe Schubert. And in net, you had the fearless Ray Emery. And guided by brilliant hockey mind Brian Murray behind the bench. Pronger, 2 teams, 2 years, 2 cup appearances, 2 very different teams he plays for, 2 different teams he faces. It's almost a tale of 2 Chris's, as the man who made his presence felt in his early St. Louis days was at the surface. Game 1, Anaheim. The Ducks defense is indeed taking no prisoners. Pronger is grading on Ottawa's top forwards, but the Sens lead the game 2-1 in the 3rd period, but Getzlaf scores early in the 3rd, Moen scores, which is under 3 minutes to play, and that's the game winner. Advantage, Ducks. Game 2, Pronger and Niedermeyer were simply incredible. When you have a dream team like this, there's going to be those nights where even they, as great as they may already be, will go above and beyond the call of duty. If a shot was there, so were they. If an Ottawa player had the puck near them, they didn't have it for long. Meeting along the boards? They didn't lose those. And the Sens struggled and only got 16 shots on Shigera to boot, which were all stopped. However, on the other side, Emery was outstanding, but with 5:44 to play, Samuel Paulson made a great individual effort. It was all the Ducks needed, a 1-0 win, both games at home. We are off to the Northern Capital. Game 3 was a different story, as Anaheim would take a 1-goal lead 3 times, only to have it tied 3 times. It was tied 3-3 late in the 2nd, and Dean McCammon scored a goal and gave the Sens their first lead, 4-3 after 2. But McCammon, in the 3rd, skating into the Ducks zone, got caught not looking, and Pronger, well, he lifted his elbow, took the forward down. No penalty was called. Sens fans were furious. So was the Sens bench. The Ducks would lose 5-3, and Pronger again drew the ire of the league and was suspended another game. This one, however, wasn't really contested all that much. It was pretty blatant. Then came Game 4, which Pronger would miss, as he took a great deal of criticism, more so about putting his team at risk in such a dire time by committing such a careless act at a crucial moment. But the Ducks took Game 4 in Ottawa, a very tight competitive game where Dustin Penner's goal broke a 2-2 tie early in the third, and that was the game winner. The Ducks are now on the verge of being champions, and our anti-hero, after 13 seasons, was one win away from the top of the mountain as he returns to action in Game 5, back in Anaheim. The Ducks were just too perfect a machine for the Senators to handle. Early in the game, Pronger again controls the extra man advantage, leading to an Andy McDonald goal. They lead 2-0 after 1. In the second, the Sens were trying. They made it 2-1. Then the Ducks made it 3-1. The Sens made it 3-2. The Ducks make it 4-2 after 2. Then the place erupts early in the third when Moen makes it 5-2. With exactly 3 minutes away, Perry sticks the final nail in. 6-2 Ducks. Chris Pronger, his amazing, controversial story journey is about to culminate. 3, 2, 1. It's the final countdown. 0. The Anaheim Ducks, Stanley Cup champions. Chris Pronger raises a storied silver barrel over his head. Love him, hate him, or anywhere in between, this moment etches his legacy once and for all. His name on the most immortal trophy in the game, a beautiful ring donning his finger. For those in Edmonton whose team had a terrible year and missed the playoffs, it sticks in their craw. For those who hate him, it made them curse at their TV screens and likely throw something at it. But for those who love him, or simply just respect him, they knew he earned this at long last. Pronger's performance in Game 2, and most of the rest of the series, I should say for that matter, is likely overshadowed by the McCammon hit, and his suspension in the prior series. But his no-holds-barred hockey can't be questioned, and indeed careless in the series, but in the end, his team has the cup, and he is, at last, a champion. Pronger was tied for 7th among all playoff scorers with his 15 points, a 4-way tie that included Solani and Perry. Pronger's plus 10 was tied for best of the playoffs with 2 others, including teammate Sam Paulson and Buffalo's Teppo Numminen. Many argued that Pronger should have won the Consummate Trophy as playoff MVP, but went to another well-deserving party, Scott Niedermayer. Many argue the only reason Pronger didn't win it was because of his 2 suspensions likely costing him votes. I don't know about that, but it's possible. During the regular season, Pronger had 13 goals, 46 assists for 59 points, his second best mark of his career once again, and he clicked with just about everyone. But let's take a close look anyway, as Ryan Getzlaf sets up 4 Pronger goals, and Pronger himself set up Andy McDonald for 9 goals. That's a third of McDonald's 27 that year. And the big star himself, Teemu Selanne, and he collaborated for 10 assists together. But overall, they worked together to produce 20 goals. Also, he was magic with Niedermayer working together for 14 different goals, as the two of them just clicked like peanut butter and jelly, and even better. And in terms of defensive scoring, Pronger was tied for 6th in the league with Pittsburgh's Ryan Whitney. He now had 5 seasons where he finished in the top 10 among defensive scorers. And for the 4th time in his career, Pronger was a finalist for the Norris Trophy, coming in 3rd in voting as the 2nd runner-up, and the 1st runner-up was teammate Niedermayer, who both lost to Nicklas Strum of the Wings. Also, Pronger registered another vote for the Hart Trophy for the 5th time in his career. And hey, for the 4th time in his career, he is a team all-star. And that means that for the 3rd time, he's a 2nd team all-star. Pronger, nearing 33 years old, was aging like a fine wine, though a very tough, bitter wine, or in this case, maybe just a well-kept whiskey. Well, what more can you say? He did it! Chris Pronger is a Stanley Cup champion, and one of the primary reasons as to why the Ducks won it all, helping them win their first ever Stanley Cup and the first of his illustrious career. On top of that, 2nd team All-Star for the 3rd time and overall 4-time All-Star. He was 6th in playoff scoring, led the playoffs in plus-minus, and speaking of plus-minus, his plus 27 during the regular season is 3rd highest mark of his career. Pronger had unleashed a brand new nasty side of himself in the playoffs, he was not finished, not by a long shot. Now he has done it all, but was far from done. The Ducks looked like they had a long-term thing going, but then there was bad news to start the 2007-08 season. Scott Niedermayer was going to miss a significant amount of time. Since he was team captain, the Ducks called upon Pronger to take over as captain to start the season, but they did add All-Star veteran Matthew Schneider to the defensive core, and the question was, what if the Ducks they had enough to repeat as champions? It was an era where it was very highly unlikely to do so. Also, they were going to be missing Teemu Selanne for many games this season. Pronger was playing well, but the Ducks got off to a bad start in October, 4-7-2. Pronger did have a big night and win over Detroit on October 15th with 3 assists. He had 2 more 3-assist games in November, both against Phoenix, as the Ducks began to look a lot more like themselves. And hey, 2 goals against, yes, you guessed it, Phoenix! And in the month of December, he had 9 points, it was a +1, and the Ducks were still finding their footing, barely above 500. Scott Niedermayer, however, had returned to action, which could only spell good things for the Ducks. In the first 9 games of January, the only game the Ducks lost was a shootout loss, and so they were looking fantastic, and as the All-Star break hit, our anti-hero was selected for the All-Star game for the 6th time in his career, along with Scott Niedermayer. The dynamic duo of Getzlaf and Perry were selected for the first time as well. The Ducks continued to get better, and in February they remained on a roll, but an incident would lead to Pronger getting a hefty suspension. During a game against the Vancouver Canucks, after tangling along the boards with forward Ryan Kessler, Pronger stopped on his leg with a skate, missing the first time but making sure to get him a second time. Clear intent to do some damage. Even though the end result saw Kessler not miss any games, Pronger was assessed an 8-game suspension. Some were furious, pointing out Pronger got preferential treatment due to being a former MVP and one of the most popular players in the league, while Chris Simon was suspended for 30 games for stomping the leg of Jarkko Ruutu of the Penguins earlier that year. Some, like those sharing a brain at Bleacher Report, said the suspension was too hefty. Wait, what? Okay, first off, Pronger deserved to be suspended here, there's no bones about that. But some go on and on about Simon's repeat offenses, which is true and was likely made an example of, but this is Pronger's 8th suspension himself and 3rd in less than a year. Either way, 8 games was upheld, and Pronger returned in time for the end of the season and the playoffs. The Ducks finished 47, 27, and 8 for 102 points, down from last season, but still 100 points is 100 points, and they finished 4th in the West this year. Awaiting them in the first round is the Dallas Stars, who finished with 97 points, much different from the Stars teams that Pronger encountered during his time with the Blues, but Mike Modano is in his 18th season still doing his thing. But now you have new stars such as Mike Ribeiro, Brendan Morrow, Nicholas Hagman, and another all-star remaining from their glory days, Jiri Lehtinen. And they also made a huge acquisition with Tampa Bay star Brad Richards. On defense, you still had veterans Sergei Zubov, Stefan Robida, and Brad Daly. And in net, the very underrated Marty Turco. Game 1 taking place in Anaheim, and the Stars destroy the Ducks. Pronger plays a decent game, but nowhere near enough as Jaguar faces an onslaught, while the Stars' defense and goaltending is top-notch in a 4-0 win. Game 2, the Ducks' defense has more trouble as Jaguar plays poorly. Pronger plays again, pretty well, but that's about it. That's as best as it is. Then the Stars win 5-2, as the Ducks all around, up and down the roster, are failing miserably. Game 3 in Dallas, and after dropping both games at home, the Ducks weren't being given much hope, but our anti-hero stamps it up. Pronger assists on a goal from Marchand to open the scoring. Then with the Ducks up 2-0 on the power play, Pronger scores, and the Ducks lead 3-0 after the first period. And on the power play in the second period, it's Getzlaf to Solani to Pronger, 4-0. The Ducks take a 4-2 win and are still in it thanks to Pronger's outstanding 2-goal, 3-point night. Game 4, the good news, Pronger and company gives Jaguar some breathing room. The bad news, he still lets in 3 goals, while Turco plays his best game so far, and the Stars win 3-1 and lead the series the same. The defending champs are about to be bounced. Game 5 in Anaheim, the Ducks, however, come to play. Tied 1-1 in the second on the power play, Pronger sets up Getzlaf to take a 2-1 lead. Pronger then set up Solani on the power play to make it 3-1 and eventual 5-2 win. The Ducks are not quitting. Game 6 back at Dallas, however, Pronger takes many careless penalties and the Stars capitalize. It's no contest, the Stars win 4-1 and take the series in 6 games. Despite his performance in Game 3, his overall performance was not even half of what it was in any given series the year before. It seemed after the suspension, Pronger was drained for the most part, and it showed. Just a year after winning the Cup, and after 2 years of making it there, for just the 5th time in his career, Pronger finds himself the victim of a first-round exit. Pronger scored 12 goals on 31 assists for 43 points. His chemistry with Ryan Getzlaf was utterly insane. They collaborated on more than half of Pronger's assists with 16, and Getzlaf also assists on half of Pronger's goals. He also had a good rapport with Scory Perry, setting up 8 of his 29 goals. He also played very well with fellow veteran blue liner Matthew Schneider, who actually wouldn't be back the following year. Pronger again received votes for the Norris Trophy, coming in 8th with 56 votes. Not a bad year, not bad at all, but other than the Kessler incident, not a very memorable one. For the first time since the 01-02 season, Pronger had over 100 penalty minutes. It was one of those seasons where his mean nature proved to be a detriment every bit as much as it was an asset. But either way, the Ducks' future and Pronger still looked pretty good. Going into 2008-2009, the Ducks faced some big changes. Brian Burke would resign and take a job with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Bob Murray would take over the GM role. The Ducks still had an amazing defense going into the season with Pronger and a healthy Scott Niedermayer and Francois Beauchemin, and they were still one of the top odds-on favorites to win the Stanley Cup. Also, Solani would be back that season and very healthy. The Ducks got off to a terrible start, however, losing their first 4 games and 5 of their first 6. Pronger was playing just fine, but the team as a whole just looked unfocused. However, they'd win 5 in a row. 2 games during that streak saw Pronger notch 2 assists. The streak ended with a shootout loss against the Canucks, but Pronger had a goal and 2 assists for 3 points. The Ducks continued to look good, winning 8 of 13 in November, and Pronger had 3 goals, 4 assists for 7 points in just 16 penalty minutes. He seemed more focused and disciplined this year. Clearly, the King of Mean was still showing no mercy to the likes of former teammates Keith Tkachuk or Ryan Smith, or getting him into those trademark Alex Ovechkin shots from the sweet spot, or frustrating Anze Kopitar. December, however, wasn't as kind. Pronger struggled in many games, but did have 2 assists and was a +3 in a win over Minnesota. January also didn't look much better, despite 2 more assists. Despite 2 more 2-assist games, the Ducks again struggled, winning just 6 of 14. While Pronger was playing pretty well, it was clear something wasn't clicking, and the Ducks were barely above 500 at the All-Star break. In February, the Ducks started to show improvement, but a playoff spot was even close to being a guaranteed. Pronger hadn't missed the playoffs ever since he left Hartford. That was his 2nd season. He did, however, score a big milestone, playing in his 1,000th career game in Detroit, no less, and despite booing him for many years, the Wings fans showed respect, giving Pronger a very nice ovation on February 20th, 2009. It was the first game of a 6-game road trip, and he was finally honored to a huge reception in Anaheim on March the 6th. The Ducks really needed to turn it up. Their playoff hopes were still not 100% certain, but in March they went on a 5-game winning streak, and Pronger had 5 assists and was a +2, and playing with that heart that you have to give him even if you hate him. On April 10th, the Ducks and Wild were battling for the final playoff spot, each with 2 games to go. The Ducks had 88 points as the Wild had 85. The Ducks just needed 1 point, as even a loss in OT or a shootout would still give them the point, and their 41 wins would still win out over Minnesota's maximum reach of 40. And the game did go into a shootout, meaning they'd get the playoff spot, but they got the win either way. For Pronger, in his 15th season, clinches the playoffs for the 13th straight time, as the Ducks finished 42, 33, and 7 for 91 points. Awaiting them in the first round, the President's Trophy winners, the San Jose Sharks, and their 117 points. Thornton and Marleau are still at the top of their game. Talents such as Devin Setoguchi and the reliable Joe Pavelski also were producing at the top level. You had productive role players like Mike Greer, and hey look, it's Pronger's old pal, Jeremy Roenick. They had an amazing defense. Future Hall of Famer Rob Blake and the excellent Dan Boyle, and Mark-Edouard Vlasic and Brad Lukowich provided a great deal of depth to boot. And in goal, also at the top of his game, Evgeny Nabokov. Nobody was holding their breath, however, for the Ducks. Game 1 in San Jose, the Shark Tank is hungry. Jonas Hiller is now in net for the Ducks, and he is sensational, stopping all 35 shots he faced, as Pronger played very well. The Ducks win 2-0 and shocked the Sharks in the first game. Game 2, Hiller faces another barrage, and Pronger's savage style results in 2 cross-checking penalties however in the second period, but he gets under the skin of the Shark stars, and the Ducks shock everyone, taking Game 2 and have a 2-0 series lead, heading home. Wow, what is this? Game 3, Hiller's exhaustion, however, is getting to him, and the Sharks take advantage. The game is tied 2-2 after 1, and the Sharks take the lead in the second period, but Pronger makes a great individual effort and ties the game. It's 3-3 after 2. The Sharks, however, take a 4-3 lead midway through the third. The Ducks press, but the Sharks get the win, 4-3. Game 4, Hiller is again the man, but the night belongs to our anti-hero. His command on offense is what made this game. He not just 1 assist, but is on ice for all 4 goals. He is steering the ship like the captain he truly is, like he has done oh so many times throughout his career. Also, Thornton, Marleau, and his old pal Roenick were reacquainted in a big way, and the Ducks take the game 4-0 and are 1 win away from pulling off a huge upset. Game 5 back in San Jose, and the Ducks are down 2-0 going into the third, but the Ducks score 2 goals in less than 5 minutes, and the game is tied. We're off to OT, but Marleau keeps the Sharks alive. We are going back to Anaheim. Game 6 in Anaheim, the Sharks struck first, but on the power play just over 2 minutes later, Pronger to get slapped to Perry. A very effective trio. They score on the power play. It's tied 1-1 after 1. Then in the second again, on the power play, it's Scott to Pronger to Timu. It's a goal, 3-1 Ducks. They stay in control and win 4-1, pulling off a huge upset in 6 games. Pronger was playing at peak form, showing the form that he had in 2007, especially his amazing performance in Game 4 where the Ducks took full control of the series, and he was showing the world, as some critics were starting to write him off a little bit as one of the league's elite, he was far from finished. Oh, well, hey, how about that again? For the 7th time in his career, Chris Pronger finds himself against the familiar foe that he knows better than anyone else, the Detroit Red Wings, the 2nd best team in the West, 3rd best team in the entire league with 112 points, and yes, they're also the defending Stanley Cup champions. And he and defensive contemporary Nicklas Lidstrom had faced each other in all 6 encounters. And going into this one, Pronger is 2-4, however, he has won the last 2. Game 1 in Motown, it's that devastating trio. Pronger to Getzlaf to Perry. The Ducks strike first. The Wings, however, tie it, and they take the lead in the second period, but with 17 seconds left in the second. It's a power play. It's a Pronger. It's a Getzlaf. It's a Timu. It's a goal. The game is tied. The clock is winding down in the third period. Looks like we're heading to OT, but with 50 seconds left, Lidstrom strikes the dagger in. The Wings take it. Game 2, the game is tied 1-1 early, but power play, Getzlaf, Perry, Pronger, it's a goal. The Ducks lead 2-1. Later on, lead 3-2 in the third, but the Wings tie it early on, and we're off to OT. Pronger plays an OT like a beast, and Hiller is making incredible saves. First OT solved nothing. Second OT, lots of close calls, and then just over a minute to the third OT, Ton Marchand scores, and the Ducks tied the series. We're going to the coast. Game 3, and again, Hiller is being bombarded, but turning everything away, and here we go again. Ducks up 1-0. Second period, power play. Pronger to Getzlaf to Scott Niedermayer. Goal. The Ducks lead 2-0. Hiller does give up 1, but he is a wall in the third period. The Ducks take Game 3 in a 2-1 series lead. Game 4, the Ducks start hot. Pronger sets up Perry 42 seconds in. The Wings, however, take a 2-1 lead, and while the Ducks tie it in the second, the Wings suddenly go up 4-2 as the Ducks are beaten 6-3. This series is tied as we head to Game 5 in Detroit. And indeed, Game 5, the Wings bring the Ducks back down to earth, a dominant 4-1 win. The Wings' defense was giving the Ducks nothing, while Hiller faces again another barrage, as now the Ducks lack actual defense, and it's starting to show. Game 6 in Anaheim, many are just waiting for the Wings to finish this. Pronger, however, plays a much better game despite Hiller not getting much of a break. After a scoreless first period, the 2 star forwards Getzlaf and Perry give them a 2-0 lead. As Ducks forward are giving Osgood a busy night in net. The Wings get one back late in the game, but the Ducks hang on. We're going to Game 7. It's not looking good early. The Wings are up 2-0, and then we're trailing 3-1. But late in the second, power play? Check. Solani? Check. Pronger? Check. And Perry with the goal? Check. But the Ducks trail 3-2, but in the third, they tie it. Oh, the clock is winding down. Hiller is standing on his head, and the Ducks are getting chances too. But with 3 minutes to play, Dan Cleary scores. The Ducks do everything they can to try to get a chance, but it's all for naught. The Ducks season, despite a valiant effort, is over. Pronger's command on the power play was once again on a different level, but the Wings exposed the Ducks' lack of actual defensive play in this series, which is sad considering you had 2 of the all-time greats in Pronger and Niedermayer, who both played very well in these playoffs, but this meant changes were about to be made. Oh boy. The Wings would go on to the Cup for the 2nd straight year, but would lose to Pittsburgh. This would be the last time Nick Lidstrom and Chris Pronger would actually face each other in the playoffs. And statistically, it's very even despite Lidstrom winning out with a 5-2 record and getting the Stanley Cup 3 times, but Pronger got 1 out of the deal during one of their showdowns. But it goes to show just how great these two were in this stretch and how valuable they truly are to their teams. Pronger had 11 goals and 37 assists for 48 points, and again, Solani's insane chemistry with Getzlaf is on display. And again, the two collaborated on 12 assists, and the star forward assisted on 4 of Pronger's 11 goals. In total, they teamed up one way or another for 21. He also assisted on 8 of Solani's 26 goals, and also clicked well with Corey Perry and Scott Niedermayer on the defense, but the cracks were showing come playoff time. For the first time since he missed 77 games in 02-03, and for only the 5th time in his 15 seasons, Pronger actually does not register a single vote for the Norris Trophy, though some have stated he was actually much better this season than the last one. I actually do agree. In addition to his 1,000th career game, he played in all 82 games this season. That's the first time in his career playing in every single regular season game. He makes the playoffs for the 13th straight time as well, but Bob Murray was ready to shake things up a little in Anaheim. The Philadelphia Flyers were in desperate need of a franchise defenseman and were willing to pay the price to get it. And indeed, on draft day, the Flyers gave out Joffrey Lupul, who the Ducks traded to obtain Pronger from Edmonton, defensive prospect Lukas Bizga, and a 2009 first-round draft pick, a 2010 first-round draft pick, as well as a conditional third-round draft pick in either 2010 or 2011 if the Flyers win the Cup in 2010. Yeesh. While forward Ryan Dingle moves with Pronger to Philly. And, well, yes indeed, the Flyers now have Chris Pronger as his era in the city of the brotherly love is about to begin. And spoiler, this trade did not work out very well for the Ducks, for the most part. Indeed, Pronger's time in Anaheim was short-lived, but still 3 seasons where he at long last achieved the biggest prize in the game, and on top of that, played in his 1,000th career game, his 3rd second All-Star team selection, his 4th overall All-Star selection, and was selected for his 6th All-Star game, playing in his 5th. Well, the chapter of Anaheim was short, but very sweet and very memorable. And despite his latter 2 seasons not being overly memorable to some, he still showed he had value, and the Flyers saw it too. Despite his start in Hartford, the Blues, the Oilers, and the Ducks, he made an impact no matter how long his time was in either team. But what could he do in Philly? So now Pronger begins another new journey in the city of brotherly love, and if history tells us anything, that if there's a perfect team out there for someone's mean mentality and vicious no-holds-barred approach to the game while being the best at doing so, it's Philadelphia. Pronger's contract, however, raised some eyebrows, or shall I say his extension that he would later sign, including that of the league. They investigated the huge 7-year deal, making that it might be violating the team's current collective bargaining agreement at that point. The annual salary in the last 2 years of Pronger's deal was just over $500,000, at which point he'd be 42 years old. And the league seemed to be concerned about the inside negotiations for Pronger to retire before that happens. However, the conditions of the deal, due to the fact that Pronger would be 35 when the contract became official, under the terms of the CBA, the only way it could be deleted from the cap space if he was on long-term injured reserve. In the end, despite all the mumbo-jumbo, I just figured I'd get this out of the way. It was found it didn't violate the CBA and it went forward. But anyway, Pronger was joining a team that had always had one of the most devoted followings in the league and have always been consistent contenders, even being amongst the best in the entire league somewhat consistently. And they haven't missed the playoffs since 1994. The problem was, in the 14 seasons since, the Flyers only made the Cup once, but the success they seemed to be poised for never seemed to come to fruition. They had 99 points and finished 5th in the East, but lost to eventual Cup champions Pittsburgh in the 08-09 season. They were coached by John Stevens, and he was starting to come under fire for the team's lack of progress, while general manager Paul Holmgren actually got praise for obtaining Pronger, a position, of course, the Holmgren has held since the 06-07 season. The Flyers were loaded with talent and grit. They had a fantastic leader and prominent scorer in Mike Richards. They had Jeff Carter with natural scoring ability and size. Danny Briere was heavily skilled with his playoff prowess. Tough Scott Hartnell, and rising prospect in Claude Giroux, and one of the best all-around forwards in the game, Simon Gagné. And joining Pronger on the blue line was veteran Kimmo Timonen, the very effective and durable Matt Carle, and the underrated Braden Coburn, and rookie Russian import Oskars Bartulis, or shall I say Latvian import. In net, you had the highly talented Brian Boucher, and the ferocious Ray Emery. The Flyers were a middle-of-the-road team, it seemed, and let's see if Pronger can come in and make a difference in what he was brought in to do. Pronger made his debut for the Flyers in a road game in Carolina, which they won. The very next day, he made an impactful presence against the Devils in a win with 2 assists and a +3. Much like almost every other Pronger trade in recent years, his jersey was selling out fast, and Flyers fans welcomed their new hero. Oh, no, he's not an anti-hero in Philadelphia, or, in Philly, if you're an anti-hero, you're a hero. As in the home opener win against Washington, Pronger notched an assist and got in the mug of Alex Ovechkin, who didn't really appreciate it all that much, for very sure. He also wasted no time integrating himself into the Penguins-Flyers rivalry, and becoming a hero when he engaged in a bit of a scuffle with 2 seconds of play and a loss, and got real up close and personal with former teammate on the Ducks, Chris Kunitz. He played another great game against Florida with 2 assists, but ending October going into November, the Flyers went on a 5-game win streak, and Pronger was red hot, 8 points and a +8 in that stretch, and being a nuisance to St. Louis and Spezza, to name a couple. The Flyers, however, hit a skid later in November, losing 5 games in a row, and Pronger was the complete opposite with no points and a -4, and playing somewhat frustrated. The team and the organization were frustrated as a whole, and coach John Stevens was fired during this losing stretch. Taking over was Peter Laviolette, who was actually coaching the Carolina Hurricanes when Pronger and the Oilers lost them in 2006. Under Laviolette, the Flyers went 2-7-1 in their first 10 games, and of course, those angry Philly fans were booing their own team. However, Pronger was so-so in that stretch, not playing overly terrible. But then after a 4-game winning streak to end the calendar year of 2009, the hero of Philly came alive. Another 4-game win streak to begin 2010, Pronger, 7 points, a +8, a 3-star selection in all those games, and sending more messages. Phil Kessel, don't even try to shoot near me. I'm sorry, Sydney, were you going somewhere? You again, San Luis? Medano? Don't make me make you retire. Oh, yes. The Flyers had finally improved, but again, much like his year last year in Anaheim, Pronger was going to have to work harder to achieve a playoff spot. The Flyers had another 4-game winning streak going into the Olympic break. Home-and-home sweeps over the powerful New Jersey and the determined young Habs squad, 4 assists and a +4. Well, and yes, for the 4th straight time and the only one on Team Canada to do so, Chris Pronger was selected to play for the Olympic team, now being a part of every NHL-oriented Olympic tournament. The only one left over from the 1998 Nagano squad, as this year's Olympics were in Vancouver. He was joined on the Team Canada by his captain, Mike Richards, and was supposed to be joined by Simon Gagne, who sadly was injured. Oskar Bartulis represented his native Latvia. Also, Pronger's former Ducks teammates, Scott Niedermayer, Corey Perry, and Ryan Getzlaff were all there, and throughout the tournament, Pronger often got to work with his former Ducks teammates, and their chemistry still clicked, which was actually very key in the semi-final win over Slovakia. That, of course, led to the infamous gold medal gain, Crosby's golden goal in overtime against the U.S., and for our anti-hero, his 2nd gold medal. He is the all-time leader in games played for Team Canada at the Olympics. For Pronger, his 4th international title and 3rd as a pro. It was back to business in Philly, 2 assists against Florida and Toronto, but consistency was hard to come by for the Flyers as the season was drawing closer to an end. One thing I feel the need to bring up is that Pronger was becoming one of the most entertaining people to interview after a game. It was evident in Anaheim, but had even more of a spotlight in Philly. Certain sound bites he'd give would make the rounds on TSN in Canada or ESPN in the US. Well, I mean, when you say things like, I don't want to get to it, he said, she said with the refs, I mean, I'm the he. Yeah, it's going to get attention. Pronger had become immensely popular all across Philadelphia and revered by Flyers fans for his style of play and the fact that he was now donning the orange, black, and white. And the Flyers did manage to, indeed, fight for a playoff spot and get there eventually. And even they finished 7th place with a record of 41-35 and 6 for 88 points. The Flyers, however, weren't being really given a chance as they faced 103-point New Jersey Devils, the first time Pronger will play in an Eastern Conference playoff series. It's not going to be easy. The Devils had scoring machine Ilya Kovalchuk, but he hadn't played many Eastern this year. They also had superb talents such as Zach Parise, Travis Zajac, Jamie Langenbrunner, Patrick Iliash, and Brian Rolston. A solid defense with Andy Green, Mike Moteau, Bryce Salvador, and Colin White. And in net, the ageless Martin Brodeur, one of the all-time greats. The Devils were still a defensive team and didn't have a great deal of depth in scoring. Perhaps Philly can do something with this. Game 1 in the Garden State, and Pronger is laying a beating on Devils forwards, and it's scoreless after 1 as the Flyers defense is playing a big game. And what's this? A power play! Yeah, you all know where this is going by now, but here's the Flyers version. Richards to Gagne to Pronger! Goal. Flyers lead 1-0. Richards makes it 2-0. The Devils get one back late in the 3rd, but the Flyers hang on for a huge 2-1 win. Game 2, the Devils come out much more aggressive, giving it right back to the Flyers. Pronger, however, is still as pesky as ever. But despite leading 2-1 after 1, the Flyers let their lead slip 3-2. With the extra man advantage, Richard to Timonen Pronger. It's tied 3-3. However, the Devils take control of the entire ice in the 3rd period, but notch a 5-3 win. The series is tied, heading to Philly. Game 3, Flyers fans are fanatical and ready for this huge game. The Devils strike power first with a power play goal. But just over a minute and a half later, speaking of power play, Pronger to Timonen to Giroux, the Flyers tie it. Both teams exchange goals in the 2nd. Pronger is making key plays to ensure the Devils just can't get into any oncoming rush. We're off to OT, and just over 3.5 minutes in, Daniel Carcillo is the hero. The Flyers take Game 3 a 2-1 series lead, and in Game 4, Pronger remains a beast. And despite the Devils leading 1-0 after 1, the Flyers take command and take a 2-1 lead after the 2nd period. Pronger assists on a huge Carcillo goal in the 3rd, and then the extra man advantage, Briere to Pronger to Carter. It's a goal, and it's 4-1 Flyers win. They take full control of the series, are on the verge of pulling off a huge upset. Game 5, however, is back in New Jersey, but it's the Brian Boucher show. And 2 goals by Giroux. Another big defensive game for our anti-hero and the Flyers' real hero, and they win 3-0 and shock the hockey world, trouncing the Devils in 5 games. Pronger was as focused as ever, and showing that past glory in these situations somehow makes players thirst for it more. There's that F word again I must bring up. Ferocity. Now winning the Flyers in the second round were the big bad Bruins, who had just pulled off an upset of their own, beating Buffalo in the first round. Boston, like New Jersey, however, was not a good goal-scoring team at all. They were second to last in the entire league, but were just second to the Devils in least goals against. That was thanks to Tuukka Rask and Tim Thomas. They had a very talented defense led by one of the best in the game at that time, Zdeno Chara. Also talents like Dennis Weidman, Johnny Boychuk, and Matt Hunwick helped a great deal. But this isn't to say Boston didn't have talent up front, but they were missing Marc Savard for most of the year. They certainly had depth and just not a lot of goals. Young Patrice Bergeron, Milan Lucic, Dave Krejci, Blake Wheeler, Marco Sturm, and veteran all-star Mark Recchi. They lend a great deal of substance. So here we go. Game 1 in Boston. It's a wild one as the Bruins take a 2-0 lead after 1. The Flyers on trail 3-1 when, oh yes, power play. Oh yes, Richards. Timonen. Pronger scores. It's 3-2 Bruins after 2. But then down 4-3 late in the third with 3:22 to play. Pronger and Carl set up Denis Briere, who ties it at 4. We're off to overtime. It's a wild extra frame, but Savard, who again has been injured most of the year, wins it for Boston, taking Game 1. Game 2 is highly and evenly competitive as you can get. Pronger and Chara, two of the best at their position, are just throwing their weight around in the most productive way possible. The Bruins lead 2-1, but with 25 seconds to play in the second, Pronger to Leno to Briere. It's a goal. It's tied 2-2 after 2. However, with 2:57 to play, Milan Lucic scores what would be the game winner. The Bruins win 3-2 and take a 2-0 series lead. Game 3, we ship to Philly and the fans believe, but it's not enough. The Flyers are destroyed and dominate at 4-1. Pronger plays a lifeless game, and the Flyers season is about to end on a sweep, it seems. Game 4 in Philly, the fans still rally behind their boys. They do not want them to quit, but will it be of any use? It's a very competitive and even game. The Flyers take a 2-1 lead in the second as Pronger scores. Tied 3-3 in the third, however, Pronger assists on the Leno goal, and it's 4-3 Flyers. They're trying so hard to stand this thing, but with 32 seconds to play, Recchi silences the rabid Flyer faithful. Looks like it's all about to end. In overtime, however, with 5:20 left in the extra frame, Gagne scores! The Flyers have a stay of execution, but they're simply delaying the inevitable. Only two teams in NHL history, the 1942 Maple Leafs in the Stanley Cup and the 1975 New York Islanders in a quarterfinal matchup with the Penguins, have come back from a 3-0 deficit to win it. In Game 5 back in Boston, the Bruins fans are just ready for this thing to end, but the Flyers and Pronger are not. Pronger plays with the power of 10 ferocious lions and sets up Leno's opening goal, and they give their goaltenders plenty of breathing room and take a huge 4-0 win. No, it can't be happening, right? Right! I mean, well, now Boucher is hurt. That is bad news. However, for Philly, Michael Leighton has to step in. Surely this will seal the Flyers' fate once and for all. But he plays a beauty, and the Flyers win 2-1, and we're off to Game 7? What's happening here? Game 7 in Boston, the Bruins take a 3-0 lead, and it looks like the Cinderella story will about to be turning into the proverbial pumpkin. And wait, the Flyers tie it. It's tied 3-3 after 2. Well, the Bruins have blown a 3-0 series lead, and now the game lead? Does this mean... Do you believe in miracles? Gagne scores with nearly 7 minutes to go. Pronger is everywhere on the ice where the puck is going to be. So is he. Leighton makes big saves, and the Flyers become the third team in NHL history to come back from a 3-0 series deficit and win. With the heart of a champion, Pronger helped make it happen. The leadership of he and Richards guided the way, and their never-say-die attitude made fans believe that the Flyers will win it all. Flyer fandom was at a fever pitch as they make their first conference final appearance since 2004, and facing them as a team they haven't faced in the playoffs since 1989, the Montreal Canadiens. This is the one team they were actually better than in these playoffs, as it's been upsets galore through the Eastern Conference. The Habs were given every bit as much a chance to win this series, as they had just shocked two NHL superpowers, the President's Trophy winners, the Washington Capitals, who finished 33 points ahead of them, and then defending Stanley Cup champion Pittsburgh, each in 7 games, each containing two of the league's most celebrated players at the time, Ovechkin and Crosby, respectively. The Habs had a hard-working, never-say-die club full of role players like Brian Gionta and Scott Gomez, who achieved Stanley Cup success in New Jersey, as well as Thomas Plekanec, Mike Camilleri, and Andrei Kostitsyn. Had a highly talented defense of Andrei Markov, All-Star Roman Hamrlik, Yaroslav Spacek, a former teammate of Pronger's, and young unheralded rookie PK Subban. In net, they had the reliable Yaroslav Halak and a promising young backup named Carey Price. Game 1 in Philly, and Leighton continued to roll in net, stopping all 28 shots he faces. Pronger and company sail like a fine, cohesive ship in a 6-0 win. Game 2, the Flyers are just playing perfect games, it seems, as close to it as you can get. Leighton this time stops 30 shots. Pronger assists on a third-period insurance marker from Leno. That gives them a 3-0 lead and eventual win. Flyers have so much momentum, they just made it look easy in those first 2 games. But the series shifts to Montreal for Game 3, and it's a different story. Pronger gets an assist on a lone Philly goal, but plays his worst game of these playoffs. He's a -3 and being frustrated by the Habs role players, and Montreal wins 5-1 and are in this series. Game 4, still in Montreal, and after a scoreless first period, Pronger wakes up and plays like himself again, not letting Habs forwards get any chances on Leighton, who only faces 17 shots the whole game, and he stops them all. His third shot of the series, Pronger assists on another Leno goal, which made it 2-0 and a 3-0 win. Game 5, back in Philly, Pronger is again vicious in every sense of the word, despite the Habs being a bit more determined than they were in the last game. But the boys in orange win it 4-2, thanks to a 3-point night from Richards, easily rolling over the Habs in 5 games. The Flyers are off to their first Cup final since 1997 and their 8th in franchise history. And Pronger is off to his 3rd Stanley Cup final in 5 seasons with 3 different teams. And again, consummate trophy talk is abounding. His name is near the top of the list, and he could help the Flyers win their first Cup since 1975. But awaiting them in the finals, in a first ever showdown between the 2 teams, the Chicago Blackhawks. Years in the dark and years of rebuilding, assembling the best group of young talent in the NHL. Team captain Jonathan Toews, the exciting Patrick Kane, Patrick Sharp, Andrew Ladd, Chris Versteeg, and veteran superstar forward Marian Hossa. On defense, the outstanding Duncan Keith, the awesome Brent Seabrook, Dustin Byfuglien, and Brian Campbell. And in goal, Antti Niemi. And their coach, a man or hero, or anti-hero, whatever you want to call him, knows extremely well, the man who guided Pronger's career longer than anyone else for 8 seasons in St. Louis, Joel Quenneville. The Hawks had 112 points, haven't won the Stanley Cup since 1961, and was the longest active slump in the NHL. It took the Hawks 6 games to beat a determined Predators team, as well as 6 to bounce a very good Canucks club, but shockingly swept the first-place Sharks to get here. Game 1, Chicago. To open up the scoring, it's Pronger to Briere, Leno. The Flyers draw first blood, but the Hawks take a 2-1 lead. But then Pronger and Briere set up Hartnell on, a power play goal. It's tied. Then Hartnell gives them a 3-2 lead. It goes back and forth. In the second, it's tied 3-3. Flyers lead 4-3. Hawks lead 5-4. It's tied 5-5 after 2. Midway through the second hour, the Hawks score and hang on to win 6-5. And Pronger steals the puck after the game, which apparently got under the skin of the Hawks, especially Kopecky, who wanted it because he scored the game winner. Well, before Game 2, CBC play-by-play man Jim Hewson calls Pronger the straw that stirs the drink. And with his hilarious interviews in the media pretty much being nonchalant about his counterpart Biff, and also being asked by Elliot Friedman if he enjoys doing this, Pronger, with his trademark smile and laugh, pretty much saw it as just another aspect of who he is and an aspect of the game he plays. Game 2, Pronger is a beast again in a very competitive game defensively, while Leighton and Niemi are also great in net. Pronger and Biff are having the matchup of the series, it seems. After a scoreless first period, the Hawks took a 2-0 lead. The lead was cut to 2-1 early in the third, but Niemi turned everything back. Hawks won 2-1, took a 2-0 series lead, and Pronger again stole the game puck as Ben Eager, the man who scored what would be the game-winning goal, skated near Pronger. Our anti-hero pretty much just shoveled his stick in Eager's direction as if to say, F you, bud. Well, yeah, it's a douchebag thing to do, but in the finals, you have to give yourself that edge, especially when you're going home down 2-0. Game 3, Philly, here we go. Pronger is again playing on a whole new level as his mind games are working, it seems, and he is frustrating Biff and the others. It's tied 1-1, and in the second, in the power play, the Giroux, the Pronger, the Hartnell, the score, the goal. The Flyers take a 2-1 lead, but trail 3-2 in a third. But 20 seconds after the Hawks took the lead, Leno tied it. We go to OT 6 minutes in, Giroux scores, and the Flyers are now in this. Game 4 has some chance of MVP are directed his way. Pronger is a man on fire. You have the puck, you either die or your shot is blocked if he's on the ice. And yes, indeed, if he's on the ice, chances are you're going to score a goal, meaning the Flyers, as Pronger is a +4. And although Chicago nearly comes back after being down 4-1, they lose 5-3, and the Flyers tie the series. Oh, baby, here we go. MVP. MVP. Well, Game 5 back in Chicago, and well, maybe karma does exist. Pronger is awful, and so is most of the team. Hawks go 3-0. Biff has a 4-point night and a 7-4 win. Pronger is a playoff worst -5. Youch. The Flyers' dream season looked like it may not come true, but we all know what happened against Boston. As Game 6 shifts back to Philly. Game 6, the Hawks strike first, but Pronger is dead focused and more determined than ever. He's definitely making up for the last game. That dangerous power play combo, Pronger, Briere, Hartnell, goal! We're tied. The Flyers take the lead in the second, but the Hawks lead 3-2 after 2. Time is winding down in the Flyer season, but with 4 minutes left, Hartnell blows the roof off the place, and tying the game, we're heading to OT, and, well, Patrick Kane scores one of the most bizarre game-winning goals in Stanley Cup history. The Hawks win the Cup. Flyers' dreams crushed. From the media headlines to his amazing performance in Game 4 to his devastating performance in Game 5, his overall presence in the series was again amazing. And you have to believe he'd be in the talks for playoff MVP, though Briere had a great playoff too. I'd say he'd probably edge him out. Pronger's 18 playoff points were tied for 10th best in the entire playoffs and led all defensemen, though sadly another chance to be champion again did not come to him. And also a chance to be playoff MVP for the first time passes him by. Pronger had 10 goals and 45 assists for 55 points, and he spread the wealth in many ways this year, clicking a lot with Matt Carl, who he was paired often with this year, and had great chemistry, and he also helped youngsters like Giroux and Hartnell along the way. But he assisted on 8 of Mike Richards' 31 goals, and a fifth of Pronger's assists were with Richards, as the two, one way or another, worked together to produce 19 goals. Jeff Carter, however, assisted on nearly half of Pronger's 10 goals, and they worked together 13 times. Pronger was making Philly fans into believers again. Pronger's 55 points was 5th best among all defensemen in the NHL, marking the 6th time he's finished amongst the top 10 in blue liners in scoring. Pronger was back in Norris Trophy voting after being snubbed completely the year prior, and he was close to being a finalist this time, finishing 5th with 168 votes. Many say he deserved better, and also just barely missed out on being a team all-star again. Pronger got himself a vote for the Hart Trophy. Anyone who plays in a Stanley Cup final 3 times in 5 seasons for 3 different teams and is a contributing factor for all 3 of those playoff runs truly has something special, and his eccentric antics when the cameras and microphones were on and constant puck stealing in more ways than one added more to the lore of Chris Pronger. His 4th Olympic Games led him to his 2nd gold medal, with a memorable performance in that semi-final game against Slovakia, and of course the Flyers being the 3rd team in NHL history to come back from a 3-0 playoff series deficit and win. It's only been done once since. Now going into his 17th NHL season, Chris Pronger showed people the prior season that he was still among the elite blue liners in the league, and now approaching 36 years old, he still had a lot to offer. He was far from finished, and the Flyers out of the 30 teams in the league were ranked 6th among favorites to win the Stanley Cup. In the offseason, however, Pronger underwent another knee operation, and while obviously that still some doubt, he has bounced back from numerous injuries in the past, and the majority of experts and pundits believe he'd still be ready, and still key in the Flyers' promising future. And oh, by the way, the Ducks, they missed the playoffs in 2010, meaning every team that has traded him, all 4, have missed the playoffs the following year after the trade. Almost like the opposite of Paul Coffey. Anyway, he would miss the first 2 games of the season, but was in action by October 11th, and was a +2 in a win over Colorado. He had a 2-goal game on October 30th against the Islanders, and in November, the Flyers went on a 10-game streak without a regulation loss and only suffered 2 the whole month, as they looked like a top-tier contender and our anti-hero was still doing his thing. After a December 15th win over the Montreal Canadiens, Pronger would encounter more issues with his knee and foot and missed 13 games between then and January 20th. And in his return on January 20th, a win against Ottawa, he had 2 assists as the Flyers were still doing very well in his absence. 2 games later against Montreal, he had 4 assists as the Flyers were rolling in a battle for tops in the East this year rather than battling just for a simple playoff spot. However, on March 8th, Pronger would play his last regular season game of the year, as again his lingering injuries took control and needed more surgeries, and he misses the remaining 16 games, and the status of the playoffs is actually unknown. The Flyers still finished 47, 23, and 12 for 106 points, second best in the East. The Flyers encountered prominent contenders, the Buffalo Sabres, in the opening round, and Pronger, while he had missed playoff games in 07 for suspensions, he hadn't missed any due to injury since that terrible knee injury in 2002. The Sabres had a very talented lineup, backstopped by their superstar goaltender Ryan Miller. On the blue line, Tyler Myers and Jordan Leopold. They had good talent up front with Thomas Vanek, Drew Stafford, Tyler Ennis, and Jason Pominville. They split the first 2 games after Miller shut out the Flyers, while the Flyers skated away with a tight 5-4 win in Game 2. They also split the next 2 games as Jeff Carter came out big in a 4-2 win, and the Flyers tied the series and Miller shut them down again. The series tied 2-2 heading to Game 5 back at Philly. It goes to overtime and Tyler Ennis scores the OT winner. The Sabres are on the verge of pulling off a huge upset. But Pronger is back for Game 6, but sees actually very little ice time. So the Flyers do send the series, however, to a Game 7, thanks to a goal by Leno. Game 7 back in Philly, Pronger sees more ice time, but you see he's still slowly adjusting. But regardless, with the Flyers up 2-0, and in the second, power play, Pronger to Giroux to Van Riemsdyk gets a goal, a 3-0 lead, a 5-2 win. The Flyers survive the possible upset. Well, Pronger's return definitely happened in the nick of time and benefited them in Game 7, but concerns about his health were making headlines in the hockey world. Their opponent in the second round would be a team they're very familiar with, the Boston Bruins, and they have made many improvements. They improved drastically with their lack of goal scoring, and were still had one of the least amount of goals allowed in the league, and they had 103 points, only finishing 3 back of the Flyers. Pronger is ready for Game 1, but you can see he's not 100%. The Bruins have his number, and he does not play well. He does not see the ice time we're used to seeing him have. The Flyers get lit up 7-3 in a loss. Pronger is hurt, his series and possibly his season are over. The Flyers would just go on to drop Game 2 at home, an OT goal thanks to Krejci. When the Bruins went home, they just humiliated our boys in orange. Back-to-back 5-1 wins, the Flyers get swept out. His only appearance in Game 1 was one he'd likely like to forget, as the season from hell, as he referred to it, is over. 3 surgeries in the span of a year, and maybe even facing another one. He was still steady with 4 goals, 21 assists for 25 points in just 50 games. Literally a third of his assists were with Mike Richards, and more than a half involved him in total, as he assisted on 4 of Richards' goals, as well as Jeff Carter's. He also was paired with Kimmo Timonen, who assisted on all but 1 of Pronger's 4 goals. Despite his year from hell, Pronger still managed to finish 10th in Norris Trophy voting, the 12th time in 17 seasons he's at least registered a vote as the league's top defenseman. He also registered 3 votes for the Hart Trophy in 23rd place, and the award was won by former Ducks teammate Corey Perry, and registers a vote for the trophy that he once won back in 2000 at least 7 times in 7 seasons. Really good for a defenseman. Pronger would only play 50 games, missing 32, but clearly was still effective when healthy. Sadly, however, the playoffs were a different story. You can see the wear and tear, but the Flyers organization, their fans, and Pronger himself had faith he'd be ready for next season, and they were really going to need him because changes were about to hit the team in a huge way. Prior to the 2011-2012 season, the Flyers traded Mike Richards to LA and Jeff Carter to Columbus. Oddly enough, they would end up on the same team together, both in LA, by mid-season. This raised many eyebrows, but Holmgren felt the deal was rock solid. So that meant Pronger was named team captain. The Flyers were still a top-tier odds-on favorite to win the Stanley Cup, despite the risky trades, and Pronger himself being a question mark. Well, hey, he got out to a good start as the Flyers won their first 3 games, all of which Pronger had at least a point, culminating in a goal and an assist in the 3rd game and a win against Vancouver. The Flyers and Pronger were looking great, but on October 24th, in a game against the Toronto Maple Leafs, Pronger took a stick to the eye when Leafs forwards Mikhail Grabowski followed through on a shot. Pronger went down and was ruled to have a concussion as well as problems with his eyesight. Concussions are being taken much more seriously at this point, and in the crazy coincidence, this would be the same season that saw Sidney Crosby return after a year off due to post-concussion effects. Pronger, however, only missed 6 games, and of course the Flyer fans hating the Penguins so much, well, he's tougher than Crosby because of that. And well, indeed, Pronger returned and looked pretty good on November 9th and played a full game and an OT loss to Tampa. He had 3 assists in a win over the Hurricanes on November 14th, but Pronger seemed to be feeling the effects of concussion, as he was taking some blows he probably couldn't absorb, and he wasn't as physical as we're used to seeing. It seemed as though he was somewhat timid out there. That showed, however, the next game against the Phoenix Coyotes, Arizona Coyotes, whatever the hell you want to call them. A terrible collision with Martin Hansel made many cringe and scared, as Pronger was slow to get up, but he continued to play and finish the game. Then on November 19, 2011, Pronger had 2 assists and played nearly 27 minutes in a 6-4 loss to the Winnipeg Jets, and was named one of the game's 3 stars. It would be the 1,167th game of Pronger's career that has now spanned 18 seasons. It was also his very last. In just 13 games, Pronger had 1 goal and 11 assists for 12 points. The last goal of his career, his 157th, was assisted by Claude Giroux, who is becoming a major superstar, and also assisted by one of the all-time greats in hockey, Jaromir Jagr. His first goal 18 years prior was assisted by Robert Cron and Michael Nylander. Jagr and Giroux were his 2 favorites in this short seasons. More than a third of his assists were on Giroux goals, more than a third of his assists were alongside Jagr. His 541st and last assist of his career was alongside Daniel Briere on a Scott Hartnell goal, where his first was alongside Pat Verbeek on a Jeff Sanderson goal. Love or hate Pronger, this was not the end that he deserved. He still gave his heart to the game and put everything he had into it, almost his entire life. The Flyers continued on without him and finished with over 100 points and 5th in the East, beating the Penguins in a very fight-filled first-round series before falling to the Devils in 5 games. He went on to go to the Stanley Cup, losing to the LA Kings, where Mike Richards and Jeff Carter would get their first Stanley Cup rings. Fans were hoping for a Pronger comeback in the playoffs, but his status remained up in the air and somewhat silent. Fans were also crossing their fingers for a return, but it never happened as the 2012-13 season arrived. Pronger never did announce his retirement, which again raised investigations over his contract, but he still worked closely with the Flyers organization, still earning a paycheck, and still walked away with a very large sum, and a short yet memorable tenure where he played in his 3rd Stanley Cup in 5 seasons with his 3rd different team. He also took home his 2nd Olympic gold medal and his 4th Olympic competition. Sadly, as time went on, despite no official announcement, everyone pretty much knew Pronger was finished. His post-concussion syndrome was just too much to overcome, and the vision in his right eye never fully returned. His rights were actually traded to Arizona Coyotes on June of 2015, sparking rumors of a comeback. Despite nothing out of Pronger's camp or even from Pronger himself, it just obviously never happened. I guess it was just wishful thinking on the part of many fans. Even though again his retirement was never announced, he hadn't played a game of pro hockey in 3 years, meaning he was eligible for the Hockey Hall of Fame. And to no surprise, he was inducted on his first ballot, alongside fellow blue liner and contemporary Nicholas Lidstrom, as well as Phil Housley. Pretty much 120% signifying the end of his career, despite fans still hopeful of a comeback. After going through numerous bouts of depression, suffering post-concussion effects, and briefly working for the Florida Panthers behind the scenes, after his NHL contract expired in 2017, he now lives a peaceful life in St. Louis with his wife and children as he helps his wife Lauren run a travel business. And he's been very open about his battles with depression and everything he went through after his career ended, but seems at peace these days. And how can you not be proud of what he accomplished in his career when you see all this? Yeah, you may have adored him, loved him, liked him, hated him, despised him, loathed him, or were 50-50 on him like I've always been, but he had the complete package that any team looked for. Proved it throughout his great 18 NHL seasons. He had the heart of a lion. He may not have always done what you agree with, but he worked hard to overcome adversity, several injuries, and even managed to stop his off-ice antics, which happened earlier in his career in Hartford, in order to focus on being a better player. And indeed, that does it for our extensive 3-part look at the career of the great Chris Pronger. What other NHL players would you like to see us cover? Let us know in the comments below. In the meantime, share the video, hit like, please subscribe to the channel. And until next time, I'll see ya!